The Fall and Flight of Humanity. The first Curvat ships appeared in Earth's skies without warning on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday in April 2089. Their vessels resembled obsidian teardrops, massive dark shapes that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. In major cities across the globe, people stopped and stared upward, phones recording the phenomenon that would mark humanity's last moments of peace. Dr. Elena Rice was reviewing data in her laboratory beneath the Sierra Nevada mountain range when the emergency sirens began to wail. As the lead scientist for Project Exodus, she had spent the last 15 years developing technology for deep space travel and colonization, a project most had considered theoretical, a response to climate concerns rather than anything with immediate application. "Systems check on all arcs," Elena commanded as she rushed into the command center, where chaos had erupted among the staff. Screens displayed feeds from around the world. Strange craft hovering over major cities, military jets scrambling only to be swatted from the sky by invisible forces. "All 7 arcs report green status," replied her assistant, Dr. Marcus Way, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. "But Dr. Rice, what's happening?" "Arthos. Exactly what we feared," Elena finished grimly. "It seems Project Exodus just became humanity's only hope rather than a contingency. The Curvat, a name humanity would learn only later from intercepted communications, didn't bother with demands or ultimatums. Their attack began just 30 minutes after their arrival, precision strikes eliminating major military installations worldwide. Their technology was beyond anything humans had developed. Energy weapons that could disintegrate entire structures, shields that rendered conventional weapons useless, and propulsion systems that allowed their smaller craft to move with impossible speed and agility. In Washington, D.C., General Thomas Carter stood in the Pentagon's Central Command Room watching as defense systems worldwide reported critical failures. The president's voice crackled over the secure line. "General, initiate Ghost Protocol." Carter felt a chill run down his spine. Ghost Protocol wasn't supposed to be real, a theoretical last resort plan that assumed Earth was already lost. "Madam President, are you certain?" "That would mean." "Earth is lost, General. The aliens just rejected our unconditional surrender. They stated they need our planet's biosphere intact, but have no use for its current dominant species. Their terms were extermination. We have to save what we can of humanity." Across the world, as the alien forces advanced methodically across continents, a select group of military units began executing carefully planned maneuvers that had nothing to do with victory. Their purpose was distraction and time. Precious hours needed to load the arcs with their carefully selected passengers. Deep beneath 7 mountain ranges on different continents, massive underground hangars hummed with activity. Project Exodus had been preparing for this possibility for years, though few believed it would ever come. The 7 arcs, massive colony ships designed for long-term space travel and eventual planetary settlement, were being loaded with their precious cargo. 70,000 humans in each vessel, selected for genetic diversity, essential skills, and knowledge necessary to rebuild civilization. Elena worked tirelessly, coordinating the loading procedures while monitoring the alien advance. "We need at least 6 more hours before all arcs are ready for launch," she reported to General Carter, who had established a temporary command post in the Rocky Mountain facility. "We'll give you what we can," Carter replied, his voice heavy. "The Chinese and Russian forces are mounting a joint counteroffensive to buy time. The European Union has deployed everything they have left. But Dr. Rice, it won't be long." As darkness fell across North America, Elena watched the streams of selected colonists boarding Ark Prometheus. Families with young children, scientists, engineers, doctors, farmers, each person carrying only a single small bag of personal items, their faces a mixture of fear and determination. Everything else they would need was already loaded aboard. Seed banks, digital libraries containing the sum of human knowledge, medical supplies, and manufacturing equipment. "Dr. Reyes," Marcus called, his voice tight with urgency. The Kiravat have discovered the Australian facility. Ark Oceania needs to launch now or risk being destroyed on the ground. Elena didn't hesitate. Give the order. Ark Oceania launches immediately. On her screen, she watched as the massive mountain doors slid open in the Australian outback, and the first of the 7 arcs rose majestically on plasma engines. Kiravat ships immediately changed course to intercept, but a squadron of Australian and New Zealand fighter jets appeared, sacrificing themselves in suicidal runs to distract the alien vessels. Ark Oceania disappeared into the clouds, then into space, its advanced stealth systems activating once it cleared the atmosphere. The remaining fighters continued their hopeless battle, knowing they were buying time for their species' survival rather than their own. Over the next 12 hours, the pattern repeated across the globe. As each arc approached readiness, military forces mounted desperate diversionary actions to cover their launches. Arc Africana, Arc Eurasian, Arc Amazonia, Arc Polaris, and Arc Himalaya all successfully broke free from Earth's gravity well, activating their experimental fold drives once they cleared the solar system's edge. At the Rocky Mountain facility, Elena watched as the last civilians boarded Arc Prometheus. "General, we're ready for the final launch. What's the situation outside?" Carter's face was haggard, sleepless for 3 days. "North America has fallen. Our last forces are concentrated around this facility, but they won't hold much longer. The aliens have figured out the pattern. They know to look for mountain facilities now. You need to go." "What about you?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. "Someone needs to ensure this launch succeeds," Carter said simply. "My place is here, with my troops. Yours is on that ark, leading humanity to its new home." The final moments were a blur. Elena boarded Arc Prometheus with Marcus and the last of her team. The massive engines roared to life as the mountain above them split open. Outside, the remnants of North American defense forces fought their final battle, creating a corridor for the Ark's ascent. From her viewport, Elena caught one last glimpse of Earth: beautiful blue oceans, swirling white clouds, and landmasses now scared by alien weapons fire. Tears streamed down her face as Prometheus accelerated away from the only home humanity had ever known. Behind them, General Carter and his forces continued fighting until the Rocky Mountain facility was overrun. Their last act was to initiate a massive electromagnetic pulse combined with a nuclear detonation, temporarily blinding the Kiravat sensors and allowing Arc Prometheus to escape undetected. In orbit, the Kiravat Supreme Commander Tsarek received reports claiming victory. All major human resistance had been crushed. Earth was theirs to transform as they wished. Unknown to Tsarek, 7 ships carrying the seeds of humanity's future were already activating their experimental fold drives, disappearing into the depths of space, bound for Proxima Centauri, the nearest potentially habitable exoplanet. The journey would take 15 years, even with the revolutionary fold drive technology. Aboard the arcs, most colonists entered cryogenic suspension, while skeleton crews remained awake in rotating shifts to monitor systems and address any emergencies. Elena, as project director, took the first 5-year shift on Prometheus. In the quiet hours of space travel, she often stood before the memorial wall that had been erected in each arc. Displays showing images of Earth, lists of the billions left behind, and the sacrifices made so that these 490,000 humans might survive. "We will remember," she whispered to the memorial. "And someday, we will return." Proxima Centauri proved both promising and challenging when the arcs finally arrived. The planet had water and a breathable atmosphere, but its gravity was 1.3 times Earth's, and its flora and fauna followed a completely different evolutionary path. The colonists named their new world Nova Terra and began the difficult process of adaptation. The first settlement, appropriately named Haven, consisted of habitats constructed from the Ark's modular components. Under the unforgiving conditions of Nova Terra, humanity was forced to innovate rapidly. The higher gravity led to redesigned architecture and eventually physiological adaptations. The alien soil required botanical innovations to grow Earth crops. The longer year and shorter day necessitated new circadian rhythms. Elena lived long enough to see the first children born on Novaterra, a new generation who would know Earth only through stories and historical records. Before she died at the age of 93, she established the Remembrance Protocols, a directive that humanity must never forget their origin and should always work toward eventually reclaiming their homeworld. As decades passed into centuries, the Novaterran civilization flourished. Forced to adapt to an alien environment with limited resources, human innovation accelerated. The necessity of survival drove technological advancement at a pace that might have taken millennia on Earth. Engineers studied and improved upon the fold drive technology that had brought them to Novaterra. Medical scientists developed treatments to help human bodies adapt to the higher gravity, eventually leading to genetic modifications that made the adaptations hereditary. By the 3rd century after the fall of Earth, Novaterra boasted 5 major cities and dozens of settlements. The population had grown to nearly 4 million. The original arks had long since been dismantled, their materials repurposed for the colony's needs. But Earth was not forgotten. Indeed, the Remembrance Protocols ensured that every child learned about humanity's original home and the debt owed to those who sacrificed themselves so that others might live. In the Advanced Technologies Division of Haven University, Dr. Sophia Reyes, a direct descendant of Elena, led a team studying the limited data they had on Curvat technology. For decades, scientists had been analyzing the sensor readings and battle footage captured during the fall of Earth, seeking any advantage that might one day help humanity reclaim their homeworld. "There's something here," Sophia murmured, staring at simulations of Curvat energy signatures, a pattern in their shield harmonics. "I think I've found it, a fundamental weakness we never had time to exploit before." Her discovery would prove to be the first step on humanity's long journey home. The return and reclamation. 300 years after the fall of Earth, Novaterra had evolved into a society that would have been unrecognizable to the original colonists. Cities gleamed under protective domes that modulated the harsh ultraviolet radiation from Proxima Centauri. Transportation networks utilized gravity manipulation technology derived from studying the arc systems. The human population had adapted to their new world, slightly taller and more muscular due to the higher gravity, with enhanced lung capacity to process the different atmospheric composition. Commander Dex Hayes stood at the observation deck of the Novaterran Defense Force headquarters, looking out at Haven City. As a 7th-generation Novaterran and the head of the military's Special Operations Division, he had spent his entire career preparing for a mission that many considered impossible: the reconnaissance of Earth and assessment of potential reclamation. "Beautiful view," came a voice behind him. Dex turned to see Dr. Sophia Reyes approaching, carrying a data tablet. "Dr. Reyes," he nodded in greeting. "I assume you didn't come here for the scenery." She smiled, her expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "The Council has approved your mission. Project Homecoming is a go." Dex felt his heart rate increase despite his military discipline. For 15 years, he had been advocating for this mission, training a specialized team, and working with scientists like Sophia to develop the technology needed. Now it was actually happening. "When?" he asked simply. "The Spectre is ready for departure in 3 days," Sophia replied, referring to the advanced stealth vessel that had been constructed specifically for this mission. "My team has finished integrating the shield harmonics disruptors based on the Curvat weaknesses we identified. If we're right, their defensive systems won't detect you." The Spectre was a marvel of Novaterran engineering, a small, sleek vessel designed for stealth rather than combat. Its hull incorporated metamaterials that absorbed rather than reflected electromagnetic radiation. Its revolutionary propulsion system used an advanced version of the fold drive that could execute micro-jumps, allowing for precise navigation even within star systems. Most importantly, it carried no weapons. This was a reconnaissance mission only. 3 days later, Dex stood before his crew of 11 specialists. scientists, engineers, and fellow Special Forces operatives, as the Spectre prepared for departure. What we're about to attempt has never been done, he addressed them in the ship's briefing room. No human has set foot in the Sol system since the fall. We have no current intelligence on Curvat capabilities or the condition of Earth. Our mission is simple but crucial. Observe, gather data, and return. We are not engaging the enemy under any circumstances. Dr. Maya Chen, the mission's xenobiologist, raised her hand. Commander, what if we find human survivors? The question hung in the air. Historical records indicated the Curvat intended total extermination, but the possibility of survivors had been debated for centuries. If, and it's a big if, we find evidence of human survivors, we document it but maintain our cover, Dex replied firmly. We cannot risk the mission or expose Novaterra's existence. The fate of our entire species could depend on the information we bring back. The journey to Earth took just over 3 months using the advanced fold drive. As they approached the outer edge of the Sol system, tension on the Spectre increased palpably. For everyone aboard, this was the system of their ancestral home, known only through educational programs and historical archives. Passive sensors only, Dex ordered as they passed the Kuiper Belt. Begin full spectrum analysis. The crew worked in near silence as the Spectre ghosted past Neptune, then Uranus. Already, they were detecting signs of Curvat activity. Automated mining operations on several moons, energy signatures indicating artificial structures. They've expanded throughout the system, reported Lieutenant Isabel Jin, the tactical officer. Significant industrial activity around Jupiter and Saturn, likely resource extraction. When they reached Mars orbit, the ship temporarily powered down to minimal life support, drifting to avoid detection while their sensors cataloged the extensive Curvat presence on the red planet. Massive dome structures covered portions of the surface, with atmospheric processors working to terraform the planet. They're adapting Mars to their physiological requirements, Dr. Chen observed. Based on these readings, the Curvat appear to require higher sulfur content in their atmosphere than humans. After 72 hours of observation, the Spectre executed a micro-jump to position itself in high Earth orbit, careful to avoid the network of Curvat satellites and stations. The first view of Earth after 3 centuries struck the crew into silence. The once blue planet was now veined with strange golden structures that spread across the continents like a luminescent web. The oceans remained, but had taken on a greenish tinge. Cloud patterns appeared unnatural, swirling in geometric formations that suggested weather control technology. They've transformed it, whispered engineer Tamara Santos, the first to break the stunned silence. Not destroyed it, but remade it. Dex felt a complex mixture of emotions, grief for what was lost, anger at the alien appropriation, but also hope that the planet itself still existed. Begin comprehensive scans. I want detailed atmospheric analysis, surface mapping, energy signature identification, everything. For 2 weeks, the Spectre orbited Earth, using brief, controlled micro-jumps to observe different regions while avoiding detection. The data they collected painted a clear picture. The Curvat had extensively modified Earth's ecosystems to suit their needs. The golden structures appeared to be massive energy collectors and distributors. Most major cities had been obliterated and replaced with alien architectural forms. The atmosphere had been altered to contain higher sulfur levels, though it remained within human tolerance ranges. Most surprisingly, the scans revealed evidence of resistance. Commander, you need to see this, called Lieutenant Jin during the final day of observation. I'm picking up irregular energy signatures in these regions, patterns that don't match known Curvat technology. Dex studied the indicated areas, remote mountain regions in what had once been the Himalayas, Andes, and Rockies. Natural phenomena. No, sir. They're artificial, and, sir, they bear similarities to old Earth technology signatures. Crude fusion reactors, from the data we have in our historical records. A chill ran down Dex's spine. Are you suggesting? That humans survived. Jin finished. It's possible. These signatures are deliberately shielded from detection. They're hiding from something, or someone. The discovery electrified the crew, but Dex maintained discipline. We stick to the mission parameters. Document everything, but we cannot make contact. The priority is returning this intelligence to Novaterra. As they prepared to depart the Sol system, Engineer Santos approached Dex privately. Commander, before we go, I'd like to suggest one last scan, a specific frequency that might tell us more about those potential survivors without revealing our presence. Dex hesitated only briefly before nodding. Do it. Quickly, Santos calibrated the sensors to broadcast a brief, encrypted pulse on an old emergency frequency used during the fall of Earth, a frequency that would be meaningless to the Kiravat, but might be monitored by human survivors. To everyone's shock, they received a response, a single brief transmission containing only a string of numbers. Its coordinates, Santos realized after analysis. And a date, 3 Earth years from now. The implications were staggering. Not only had humans survived on Earth, hiding from the Kiravat for 3 centuries, but they were organized enough to maintain communication protocols and suggest a rendezvous. The Spectre returned to Novaterra, the crew sworn to secrecy about the communication until they could report directly to the Planetary Council. The data they brought back changed everything. The comprehensive scans of Kiravat technology allowed Novaterran scientists to refine their understanding of alien weaknesses. The evidence of surviving humans on Earth transformed the abstract notion of reclamation into a moral imperative to rescue their stranded cousins. Most importantly, the detailed analysis of Kiravat planetary operations revealed a critical vulnerability. The golden energy web covering Earth required synchronized maintenance cycles. Once every 8.3 Earth years, the entire network powered down for 47 minutes to prevent system overloads, a window of opportunity that would occur in exactly 2.8 years. In the largest facility on Novaterra, construction began on the Liberation Fleet. Not massive invasion ships, but specialized vessels designed to exploit Kiravat vulnerabilities. Leading this effort was a coalition of the brightest minds, including Sophia Reyes and a team of engineers who had refined the shield harmonics disruptors into offensive weapons. Commander Hayes was promoted to admiral and given command of the operation. This isn't just about reclaiming territory, he told the assembled fleet officers during their first briefing. This is about saving our people who have been fighting and surviving for 3 centuries while we built a new world. This is about fulfilling the promise made by our ancestors when they escaped Earth, that one day humanity would return. The plan developed over months of intensive simulation and training. The fleet would arrive in the Sol system shortly before the energy web's maintenance cycle. Using the advanced fold drives, they would execute synchronized micro-jumps to deploy shield disruptors at key nodes in the Kiravat defense network. When the energy web powered down, the Novaterran ships would launch a coordinated strike against the primary control facilities identified by the Spectre scans. Most crucially, they established contact with the Earth resistance using long-range communicators designed to be undetectable by Kiravat sensors. The survivors, calling themselves the Remnant, numbered fewer than 1 million humans living in hidden underground facilities. For centuries, they had waged a guerrilla war against the aliens, their existence unknown to their enemies who believed humanity extinct. The Remnant confirmed they could disable critical Kiravat systems from within during the attack, creating a cascading failure that would render the aliens vulnerable. They had been planning such an operation for generations, but lacked the offensive capability to capitalize on it. On the eve of the mission, Admiral Hayes addressed the combined forces, 27 ships crewed by Novaterra's finest, carrying advanced weapons systems designed specifically to target Kiravat vulnerabilities. 300 years ago, humanity faced extinction, he began, his voice transmitted to every vessel in the fleet. Our ancestors escaped with nothing but hope and the determination to survive. On Novaterra, we built more than just a colony. We built a civilization that has surpassed what existed before. Now we return, not as refugees, but as liberators. The Liberation Fleet departed Nova Terra to thunderous cheers from the population. The journey to Earth took 2 months of careful navigation to avoid early detection. When they arrived at the edge of the Sol system, they immediately detected increased Curvat activity. More ships, enhanced security protocols. "They're nervous," observed Lieutenant Jin, now captain and commanding her own vessel. "Something has them on alert." The Remnant, Dex realized. They must have begun their operations. Indeed, communications from Earth confirmed the Remnant had initiated preliminary sabotage of secondary systems, creating distractions to draw Curvat attention away from the approaching fleet. As the critical moment approached, the Liberation Fleet executed their plan with precision born of years of training. Ships jumped into position around Earth, deploying shield disruptors that created temporary blind spots in the Curvat defense grid. The Remnant activated their sabotage protocols, causing cascading failures in the alien infrastructure. When the energy web began its maintenance cycle, powering down across the planet, the Nova Terran forces struck, not with world-destroying weapons, but with surgical precision, neutralizing command centers, communications hubs, and defense installations. The Curvat response was initially confused, then desperate. Their ships scrambled to defend key installations, but centuries of unchallenged dominance had made them complacent. Their tactics were predictable. Their technology, while advanced, had vulnerabilities that the Nova Terrans had spent generations studying. The battle for Earth lasted 17 hours. From his command ship, Dex coordinated the complex dance of attacks and defensive maneuvers. Nova Terran ships took damage. Some were lost with all hands, but the momentum remained firmly with humanity. The turning point came when Remnant forces emerged from their hidden bases worldwide, activating dormant systems that interfered with Curvat communications. The alien command structure fragmented, their coordinated defense collapsing into isolated pockets of resistance. Admiral Hayes led the final assault on the primary Curvat command center, a massive structure built atop the ruins of what had once been Geneva. His ship took heavy damage in the approach, systems failing as they penetrated layer after layer of defenses. In the final moments, as his vessel limped toward the target, Dex received a transmission from the Remnant leader, an elderly woman whose ancestors had maintained the resistance since the fall. "Admiral," she said, her voice clear despite the static, "after all these centuries, humanity stands together again. My people are activating the final protocols. The command center's internal defenses will be offline in 30 seconds. The Nova Terran forces delivered the decisive strike, and with the destruction of their command center, the Curvat defensive strategy collapsed entirely. Across Earth, alien forces fell into disarray, some retreating to orbital facilities, others making last stands that were quickly overwhelmed by combined Nova Terran and Remnant forces. 3 days after the battle began, Admiral Hayes stood on the surface of Earth for the first time in his life. The air smelled strange, sulfurous, and alien, but beneath that, there was something that resonated in his DNA, something that whispered, "Home." Beside him stood the Remnant leader, Ilara Winters, her eyes wide as she looked up at the open sky, something she had rarely experienced in a lifetime spent in underground facilities. "It will take generations to restore Earth," she said softly. "The Curvat changed so much." "And we have changed too," Dex replied, thinking of Nova Terra, the world that had shaped his people for 3 centuries. "But together, we can build something new, honoring both where we came from and what we've become." As Nova Terran ships landed across the planet, bringing supplies, medical aid, and returnees eager to help rebuild, humanity took its first true steps toward reclamation. The surviving Curvat, cut off from their empire by the destruction of their long-range communication arrays, retreated to Mars, establishing an uneasy boundary that would define Sol system politics for centuries to come. In what had once been the plains of Africa, now covered with golden energy collectors that would take decades to safely dismantle, Dex and Sophia Rice stood watching the sunset, a spectacle neither had ever seen on Nova Terra, with its different star and atmosphere. "They thought we were gone forever," Sophia said quietly. "They thought they had exterminated us like pests." "That was their mistake," Dex replied, watching as the golden light painted the alien structures and the beginning efforts of human reconstruction alike. "They never understood what makes humanity resilient, our ability to adapt, to remember, and to return stronger than before." Above them, ships moved between Earth and orbit, carrying the seeds of Earth's rebirth and the promise of a future where humanity would never again be confined to a single world. The stars were emerging in the darkening sky, not just distant points of light, but destinations where human ingenuity and determination would eventually reach. They had lost a world, survived, and returned to reclaim it. And in doing so, humanity had become something greater than it had ever been before.